Okay, I think we're set, everybody. Thanks for your patience. Just got to get logged in. Show you amazing slideshow. I'm Jenny. Hello. I've been costuming since the 1900s, so I'm very old. This is maybe the latest costume I made, but it's got a bajillion techniques inside of it, so I thought this would be a fun one to share. And I'm literally just going to take you through every piece and part, and I've got an hour, so I'm gonna go at kind of a clip, but at the end, if you guys have questions or want more detail on something, I can loop back to it. The very last thing I'll cover is how I did the shield, which I'll end up showing you guys what that looks like, but it's got a 3D hologram sign fan in it, so it actually gives like the illusion of the Zonite shield, like 3D piece. So I'll talk a little bit about how that came to be. So that's maybe the most unique piece of this costume. And honestly, that's what made me make this costume. I actually wanted to make the shield before I even knew which Link outfit I wanted to wear. And then, of course, this was my favorite in the game, and it was exceedingly annoying to get. So anytime I do a costume, I always start off with reference art. I mean, I think we all kind of know that, something to jump off of. And I will say, at the time when I started this, the game was still new. It had just come out. So this drawing and this awesome turnaround, I did not have when I started this. So I put details into the shirt because I could tell from the in-game model that there was some sort of blue line that kind of went across maybe his chest. I did not realize there was one on the back. So I was trying to make this costume, even the parts you can't see, as accurate as possible, but they got me by releasing this afterwards. So anyway, I try to find turnarounds. I am very excited when I go through how I made the shin armor. The way they have it drawn there is exactly how I thought to make it. Like, I was like, it must be like this, right? So a lot of this, obviously they're inspired by like samurai armor, things like that. So a lot of how I built it and attached things, since I didn't have reference, I sort of based off of samurai armor and how that's put together. Yeah, this is called the Mystic set for anyone who doesn't play the game. You have to get a lot of baubles and go through a lot of caves to buy this and get it. But I love that it's glowy and just loved the look of it, so this is the one I landed on. And it ended up needing a ton of love, so we're just gonna go piece by piece. So the shirt, the part you see the least of, materials-wise, I wanted linen, like white linen, and then the blue, it's all linen. I wanted it to feel more tactile. Early on when I was looking at the reference art, I feel like anytime you do a costume, you should really decide, do you want to do it like picture accurate? Do you want to go more cartoony? Do you want to go more realistic? And I wanted to keep the sort of cartoony proportions that they have in the game, but I wanted to have realistic materials and how you might join things together to be more realistic versus just it's glued together and it's magically staying put. So that was sort of the rules I set for myself. There's no right and wrong way to make a costume. It's however you want to make it. It's your thing. But it's always good at the beginning to kind of decide how you want to approach it, because it'll help you make decisions on, like, I could have gotten a cotton. I could have done something shiny and fabulous if I wanted this to be really glowy, or if I was planning it for a stage show and I wanted the lights to hit it, I could have gone a completely different path. But I was going for realistic-ish materials in as many places as possible and trying to get some textural stuff. So linen's what I went with. Cotton bias tape, again, to have, it's a little more textural. It is just cotton, but I got like a rough spun. The shirt, the undershirt that makes up this arm thing, instead of crocheting something myself, I bought a swimsuit cover-up and just hacked it to pieces. So that is part of this costume. But this, you can get a little peek at what I did. So I tried to find the pattern pieces I used for this. I had, I don't know, just like a high-necked dress shirt pattern. I couldn't even find which one I used, but I knew I wanted a collar and something simple, and so I just based it off of a commercial pattern and didn't use the sleeves and sort of took it in and modified. But I wanted something that would be more fitted underneath all these layers so I wouldn't get bulky. And then again, you can see the little blue line I did across the front because I knew from the sides there was something going on there. But it's a zipper down the front because you'll never see it, and that's just easier instead of trying to do like a bunch of buttons or something like that. So this is just a very simple, comfortable. I didn't line it. I wanted to keep it really light because I knew I'd be wearing a binder underneath this and have a bunch of layers. So for comfort, I just kept it at one layer. This is the swimsuit cover-up that I basically, I'd say cut the sleeve off, but this is actually a part of the skirt that I thought looked best on the shoulder. And in the actual reference art, see if you can kind of see here. It's blue, it's white. They look like magic lines that are kind of staying there. But to me, I was like, if I was going to make that in those thin pieces, it would be something like a crochet or beaded piece. The beads, I liked it. It was a little extra embellishment to get colors in. So again, this was my choice of doing realistic materials and textures to imply what I was seeing in the game. So this is me taking it maybe a little more fabulous than it is, but I enjoy them. For these, it's glass seed beads. I slid them on. They are the exact size or just a little bit smaller than what I was stringing them on. So I used a needle to string it, but they actually just stay by tension. So I can move them and adjust them to stay sort of halfway up, and I put them in a nice random pattern. The pants, these pants. I was originally making them more like hakama pants or like a very traditional path, but they do this weird sort of pucker in, and I actually found an amazing pattern. I'm going to butcher it. It's NDLWRK Shop. So they made these, they make a lot of patterns. This specifically is for Sorcerer Hunter, like pants, and they were perfect for what I needed. They had the exact pleats in the front. I only had to modify them just a little bit. The pattern had pockets, but like, listen, I'm all for drafting your own stuff, but if someone's already done the work for you, like support other artists. So I don't know this person, but I love the pattern. It was easy to follow. I recommend. So I bought that. I used blue linen, which I got from the same place. And again, I'm trying to include every place I sort of got from. So anything, if you see at the bottom there, it's an Etsy shop, and that's the seller name. But this is where I ordered the linen from. It was a little bit thinner. So for some of the pieces, I needed more, if I need to be a little tauter or just not see-through, I was using fusible interfacing on the back. So sometimes it's for structure and sometimes it's just so you couldn't see my panties through my pants. So basically my first step was to make all of, I laid everything out and I was just unwinding this fusible interfacing and just interfacing the back of it to give a little structure. For the pants, I used very, very light, and this was more just to make sure the pleats would stick. And this is the first try-on, the squat test, and a very messy workroom. Just ignore that. But it has pockets. Everything fit really well. And the only thing I altered is maybe where the bottom, like how thick I made the cuffs at the bottom, because I don't know, he sort of low rides below the knees, like where you would normally cuff it for this costume, so they sit a little bit lower, but I just made sure everything looked nice. If you're not a confident sewer, make yourself a muslin mock-up and make sure it fits great. My friends all hate me because I just commit, and I'm like, I know this will work, and I usually just go straight at it. So if you're confident, you can just go right in and then sort of test and adjust. So this was my test, but it fit perfectly, so no need to change anything. The tunic, or the robe as they call it in the game, but it's really just like a front and back tunic. So to make this pattern, I wanted something a little textural or something a little different. So I ordered from Aviva Wholesale. So if you ever need like heat transfer vinyl, they sell all different kinds. They can ship wherever. It's a lot cheaper than buying like Cricut brand. Buy it if you need to get it in a pinch, but I think they sell phenomenal stuff, and it'll come in big old sheets as well. So I ordered a few different types to try from them, and you'll see what I was trying out. Same bias tape, same blue linen. This, I used a heavyweight fusible interfacing because obviously this tunic is a little stiffer. It folds a little more dramatically, so I wanted something with more structure. I didn't really use a pattern for this. Again, make a mock-up if you're not confident, but I was like, I know a rough shape, so I just sort of went at it. So same thing, you can see on the left here where the interfacing, the fusible interfacing is just on the back of it. So I was making sure I had the shape right. And then I basically took two sides of it. So the inside, you're not going to see the interfacing. So if you kind of look here, you can see that I just sort of sewed both sides together and kept the raw edge out because I knew I'd be trimming it with bias tape. But just as I was working, I kept putting it up on the dress form to make sure it was keeping the shape, it was tapering kind of how I wanted. And mostly what I was doing here is making sure that I got this silhouette and that it wasn't too feminine on me because I'm a girl. I have a bit of a curve, but I was trying to still keep Link's, you know, I mean, he's a little effeminate too, but I was trying to make it a little more angular to match. So you'll see these are taken at different times, obviously, but once I got the pants done, I was sort of fitting everything together just to make sure it was lining up. I did a few test fits. So this is me wearing it and making sure, again, it could sit nice and flat and that I didn't look too curvy. I kept that boxy shape. And once I had the shape I liked and I knew I didn't want to take in the sides, this is where I got some of that bias tape. I had a few different colors, so there was a lot of me deciding which tone I wanted. I'd ordered a couple, and I kind of went with this more muted palette. And this video, you're going to kind of see, these were some of the tests that I did. So I did a puff paint, a glow in the dark, a white, sort of a shimmery, which looks silver, and then a flocking. So the flocking one has like a soft texture, like think He-Man Battle Cat toy. Maybe that's too old of a reference. Jeez. Like a toy that has like a soft, like fabric-y feel. That's called flocking. And you can actually get kits for that if you ever want to flock something. You like glue it down and add a bunch of fibers. Yes. So I didn't realize they made that as an iron-on thing, and they do, and it's great. So originally I looked at the puff paint because I thought maybe having it raised would be great. It looks a little crazy here because I was doing some heat tests too, and if you put too much heat on it, it bubbles and turns crazy. But looking at the whole thing, I actually liked how the flocking looked the best. And again, I'd made the rule for myself to do textural things, so that's how I decided on textural for the flocking. So how I got the design, I literally took like pictures of my TV in some points. My partner Tom here was like, you can just screenshot and send it yourself, idiot. So I did that. But I basically took like the front, the back, and I took it into, you can take it into any drawing tool you're comfortable in. A lot of people, you want to work in vector because vector formats can scale up to any size. So for a lot of people, that's Illustrator. Illustrator's fine. I actually love Adobe, it's called Animate now, but it used to be Flash. I love drawing in it. It's all vector, and that is where I work the fastest. So that's actually where I did all of this. So basically, I dropped this in, I sort of stacked him in a weird, rough way that could be sort of a flat shape, and then over top of it with vector, I just started tracing lines out. And that's kind of what you're seeing here. This is like this layer turned off. There are some places where maybe I made it up a little bit and made sure it made sense. Like you never see what's under his belly flap. So I just made some assumptions of like how that pattern would connect. But I did all that in Flash. I exported out, and I have a Cricut at home. So I had to take it into Cricut and then break it into small enough pieces that it would fit on the bed to be cut out. And then make sure I labeled all of those appropriately and then cut them out, and I was weeding forever. So this is where you can see like part of the pattern I was weeding. And then each of them I marked where it was like A1, A2. And then before I did anything, this is like laid out on my ironing board just to make sure everything was like kind of roughly could be placed together. I didn't have to make adjustments, all of that. And then once I had that, I sort of meticulously just started at one end and worked my way down, ironing it on to the piece. I didn't actually do any of the bias tape until after this was all connected, so I could just bias tape over the edge of it. But I ended up cutting all of the vinyl short. Instead of having the flocking go underneath the bias tape, I was worried there'd be raised bumps. It actually ends, like all of it cuts exactly where the bias tape meets. So that was me being manic and just slicing through everything as I went. But this was a great phase to do it. But you just heat press it on. You can use an iron or a press if you have one, and just slowly but surely attached all of it. You can see, this is kind of an example, instead of having this go underneath the bias tape, you can kind of see it cuts right there because the flocking's a little bit raised, and I liked having that texture. I did some satin stitching on the corners as a little detail piece. But then when it was done, tried it on, made sure it kept the shape, and everything was looking great. And I had enough little diddly bops that I had already weeded out that were, on the wider parts that were getting cut off, that I added it to a mask that was of the matching color, so I could wear that around the con too. I actually had enough to make a matching one for Thomas to wear around with me. But yeah, so this is kind of how it turned out on the con floor. This was at Dragon Con when I first wore it. But I really loved how sometimes it just looks graphic and you can't tell this texture, but in certain lights, like you can see it's casting shadow, or like you can catch in close-ups that there's some texture to it. So I was really happy with how that turned out. The obi, so underneath all of this, there is a little belt that has a lot of pattern to it that you barely see, but I saw it. So again, I had some fabric laying around that was basically like a white cotton, a little bit stiffer. I put some heavyweight interfacing behind it. I used a bra hook and eye as the attachment. And then again, I used Cricut's infusible ink. So if anyone's ever used that, it's not vinyl that sits on top. It's actually like dye ink that heat will like sink in and it'll set into your fabric, so you can wash it, but it's not on top, it's in it. And I got this like genuinely the ugliest looking weird tie-dye situation. Like I don't know where I would have ever used this green-brown situation, but it was perfect for this. So let's see if this plays. Oh, we won't watch the whole thing. So this is a hypnotic ASMR of it cutting out these little squares and triangles. I did the same thing I did with the front, where I got a picture of this obi as best I could from the game, and I just kind of took it into Flash or Animate, and I traced out these diamond patterns. So got that thing cutting. It's another angle. Ooh, we can see all of it at once. It's exciting. And then on the right, you can see where I'm heat transferring it. So you lay it down, you put a guard between it, you heat it, and then when you take it away, this is sort of infused into it, and it has a very subtle like green to brown pattern to it that was in the ink, which to me I liked because it made it look like this older dye job or something like that. It felt more samurai to me. So that's on the belt at the center, and you can see, we're gonna watch this video forever apparently. Slideshow. Okay, so you can kind of see, well, I don't know why we have that. Hopefully it doesn't stay for eternity. You can see over here, though, kind of how the belt turned out, and the colors really pop. A lot of times when you first look at it, it's very light colored, but when you actually apply the heat, it gets a lot darker. So that was the obi. The shoes, these are really simple. I got them on Amazon. I think they actually make white ones. I could not find any to order, so I got this light tan color. And you can use leather paint on a lot of other fibers, and that's what I used on these. And it took about 10 to 15 coats because it was just sucking in the color, and white is a hard color to coat. So I just, every day would just add a little bit more. So you can kind of see this one has a coat or two on it. This one's barely got any, and eventually I got them to white enough for my liking. I wasn't going for pure white. I liked a little bit of texture, but definitely had to get them going. Okay, the glove. This guy, I just used, again, some scrap fabric. I think I had some broadcloth. I had a metal ring. And then I ordered this blue braided cord because it's used kind of in other places. Ooh, I have a video of it. I didn't really use a pattern short of, I've made gauntlet gloves before. I didn't want side seams. So this basically has a seam around the wrist, so I can have it kind of come in a bit, and then it has a seam down the back, but there's none on the sides. And the cording is one piece that starts here, and it wraps and goes all the way around, and then comes back. So there's no other connection points than at the ring. And I hand sewed this sucker onto the edge because it's really not meant to be on the edge. So every D&D game for like 3 sessions was just me hand sewing this glove together. But it came out great. And I used invisible thread. Like if you've seen it, like that's kind of the best way to really get it to blend in between a blue and a white. All right, the armor. Let's talk about some other fun stuff. Ava foam is what's under most of this armor. I was using barge to attach everything. There's elastic, there's some spray glue to attach the fabric to it. We'll talk about it. I've got different rope cord. And then I'm gonna give a shout out to Rocket Props. I don't know them, but they created the bevel, which holds your X-Acto blades. It's made, they've got 2 for each size if you've got like a more hobby one or a bigger one. But it is set up, this little knob in the back, lets you adjust the angle of it. So if you are cutting something where you need all the edges to be at a 45 angle or something like that, like listen, you could train yourself to be really steady-handed, or you could just get a bevel and it's going to do it for you, like it sits flat. So I'll give a shout out to them. I use the heck out of this thing, and it's like $30, but it's a workhorse, and it's really well made. But okay, so for the shin armor, same process of tracing out these little noodle wiggles. So I went in, I weeded them. It's out of the same flocking. I've got over here some of the cording. This was me deciding between which color to use. I went with the darker color because I thought it looked a little more textural, I think. But looking at how it was attached, I was like, all right, I think there's a piece in the front, and then I'm going to attach the cording to them and then have it open in the back. So it would open as like a 3-panel piece, which again, that's how they drew it later. So I was really excited. But this was me testing. If you're ever trying to figure out how you want to attach or have your armor hinge, just tape it together and put it on you and try a few different ways before you commit. But this was an early test with my dirty mirror that I need to clean. Sorry, everybody. But basically, I figured all those out, and then for the white pieces, I think I just sprayed white Plastidip to finish them and keep them white, and then I glued on, I want to say I just hot glued the cord around it. It's either hot glue or it's barge, 50-50 shot, I'm not sure. But I just attach it directly to those panels. The front panel, I use like an E6000 or a spray adhesive. I sprayed it across the front, and then I just carefully laid the fabric down on it. If you're going to do that, test a piece of your fabric on something else just to make sure your glue won't soak through it or ruin it. Like silks and things like that could just be destroyed if they come in contact with something wet. But this linen was like, this is great, let's do it. So basically, I glued that down first. The edges were raw, and so I used the trim to just hide the raw edges. And then I attached this cording around the front to the backs in order to be the hinge. So truly, the only thing holding this front part together was this to begin with. In the back, to hide and make it look like this continuous knot, because that's kind of what it looks like in the game, I've got a little piece of Velcro and this like fake hoop that sort of just like sticks in. On the inside of these, now I could have just kept them like that. They would have stayed all right, but just because you're bending a lot and like your calves flex, on the inside of this, you can kind of see it here, there is some Velcro. So there's a Velcro tab. There's 3 of them, so I can like keep it together. But also just to make sure that there wasn't too much pressure on it, inside these, I also made an elastic, there's 2 elastics, one kind of above my calf and one at my ankle, that run through just foam hoops. So the foam hoop attaches to the back of the armor, and the elastic's just running through it. And basically that just helps keep the armor from just constantly sitting on the top of my foot or sitting on my ankle. It kind of helps hold it up. And it keeps a lot of the pressure off of what's keeping it closed. So if anyone's interested, later I can open one up and you can peek in at my calf if you want to see the inner workings of it. I did not get pictures of it. I was Kong crunching, so you're at the mercy of the photos I was able to take as I went. For the shoulder armor, it's basically the same process, but they were just like rounded squares. They have a slight curve at the edge. Again, this is where I was using the bevel. I wanted to have the edge taper away so I'd have something to glue the rope to without the rope sitting up too high. So same process. I sprayed down the front of it, laid the fabric on top, and then to attach all of this together, I basically punched holes through all of it, and then anywhere you see some of these ties, like the white ties, that's actually tying each together. So the same way a samurai kind of laces up his armor, that's how they're attached to each other. But then to keep it on my arm, because in the game, there's like magical poles that shoot out of Link's arm. Even in the concept art, they're drawn like weird. I have no idea what they're supposed to be. But functionally, I made a piece of elastic that, just like the shins, it kind of slides through a little hoop on the back of this armor, and it goes around my arm to give it some tension so it'll just stay up on its own. And then I made a little like fabric piece that just covers that and looks, like linen instead of like elastic. But it just sort of sits over everything. Oh yeah, look, you can see these weird, what is that? It's just a grommet and then a pole, and it floats there, and that's the only attachment points. Someone explain what that is. Anyway, so I adapted it a little bit, but here you can see this is the piece that covers the elastic. These are a bunch of try-ons. Oh, here you can see the elastic before I had the piece on it. But I tried it out, and I did a lot of like kicking my arm around, and it stuck and didn't move and worked out great. You can also see here early on I had this white string that tied all the way up. I'd kept it originally with enough to tie around my neck because I was worried if for some reason these were too heavy for the elastic to stay up on its own, I could at least run this under my costume and give it some support, but I ended up cutting it off. I didn't need it at all. But yeah, here you can kind of see some of the lacing, and I mimicked it fairly close. I didn't do these like long parts, and then there's also a piece at the bottom that's a little bit raised. I just chose to knot it in like this. So all of those were intentional choices of what I thought looked better like in person in real life, because it's your costume. You can do what you want. So here's some pictures of it at the con, the shins and how they end up sitting, and then the shoulder pieces you can kind of get from above how they sit together, but held up beautifully. Okay, belts. We'll go through these pretty quickly. Belt buckles, I found one I ordered from like Amazon on the left. This metal clasp, it's so specific, and I have no idea how like this person had it. They don't even have it up anymore, but it's almost identical to what's in the game, so huzzah. But it basically one side slides onto that crescent moon, and then it stays by tension. So I snatched that up, but this was the seller. Maybe they can find more. Noah Bishop's where I got the leather strips from. I got kind of a wider set because I have something that can cut leather strips down, so that's what I used to take. Like that blue is the belt that's thicker in the center, but then I also stripped it, like made thinner pieces to wrap around. There's pieces on my back where like there's blue thin straps that wrap around the white. And I got a tassel for my butt because there's a butt tassel. So this is the tool I used. Oh, it's literally called Craft Tool brand. It's a leather strip cutter if you're looking for one, but you basically set this to the length you want, and you just run your leather along that, and it'll cut it to those that exact size. So I cut down all the belts to the size I wanted. I used a hole punch or a leather punch to punch the holes to attach it, and just hand stitched all these together. So you can kind of see how I did the connections for the angles. You can see this cool little finding I was so excited to find. And here's pictures of like the blue belt. See at the waist, I just cut down into smaller strips to use to wrap around the other pieces, so it would all be the same color. So, boom. The bags that are on his butt did not have great pictures of. My friend So Angry, who was here as a guest, she was working on a version of this for Harrison from Voltman Props, and we kept sending each other's pictures. We would like screenshots where we were like convinced this was like an angry man's face, like with a mustache and not a bag. So we kept joking about how we'd make it. So there's a little bit of improv for what we did with the bag. So I just wanted to make sure the silhouettes were right and like made something that felt bag-like or like what a tab would be. But I definitely just rated like my button stash and was trying to decide what button would look best. I landed on this one, but you can see me just trying on a bunch of things. This leaf was very close to winning. Felt very Linky. All right, Zonite batteries. I won't spend a lot of time on this because this is actually something I purchased because I was running out of time, and there were already amazing 3D models that existed in the world. So I got a kit, so that still means I had to paint it and finish it and glue it and wire it and da-da-da-da-da. But this was Cyan, I guess. I went with them specifically for this because this 3D print wasn't an extrusion. It was photoreactive, so it's a lot smoother. There's less sanding, long and short of it. And I was running out of time. So I ordered from them. They were great to work with. There was actually a little problem with the coloring of the clear parts that came in, where I got kind of two colors that didn't match, and they just sent me a whole new set. So fabulous, A++, would shop again. This kit did not come with lights, but it came where there were holes and there's space if you wanted to light it. So I just ordered myself 3mm pre-wired LEDs in green, and then I ran everything in parallel, so anyone who's in my electricity class will know what that I was talking about. But I ran that off of a 9-volt battery that just sits in my pocket, and they light up. So the paints, I wish I could say I used really fancy paint, but I was running out of time, so there was a lot of spray paint and spray paint techniques. So here's a little bit of what that looked like on the left. This is how the kit came. So gray with the exception of those parts. And again, you can kind of see some of them were like almost white versus being green. I taped off and spray painted a lot of these gold. You will notice there's tape sort of in this inner ring, which is on the inside. The reason I taped that is so there wouldn't be any paint there. So when I glued it, I wasn't gluing to paint that could chip off. I was gluing to the actual material. So a little pro tip there is don't paint over your connection points. This messy nonsense is me using a breadboard but not wanting to take the time to like cut the wires as I'm testing stuff out. So this is me just testing to make sure I could run enough off of one 9-volt battery and power everything and that they would light up and look great, and they did. So then I cut everything down, stuffed everything inside, and again, it's all wired to where there's one single wire that's white and it kind of runs under this belt and it just sits in my pocket, and I have a button in there. I can turn it on and off as I please. One problem with this kit and some things I'm going to replace. So these little delicate guys, 3D prints tend to be very fragile. So this was earlier in the con, everything's intact, but you'll maybe notice here, this guy's down to one. He was snapped off just from walking around, and I haven't actually repaired everything yet. So you'll notice this guy has no prongs at the moment. I plan to replace this with styrene because it is rigid and plastic and it'll paint up the same way, but it will not snap as easily, like it'll have some bend to it. So that's on my list of things to repair with this, but if you're making these or you're making one from scratch, I would recommend just going ahead and doing those little tiny nibbly news out of styrene or something that can take a beating because it's against your leg. All right, let's talk about the mask. Oops, I didn't delete that slide. I've got paint, barge, clear resin, yellow tint for that resin, and then some Ava foam, and I used a foam clay I got off Amazon. But functionally, I printed out to scale, just a flat, again, this is where I took screenshots. I sort of traced in vector what this looked like, this mask, and I made it to size. This is how big I want it. So then I started cutting out pieces of Ava foam. I used kind of varying sizes, but I think 3 mils, kind of the base for a lot of this. And the parts I knew, the nose that stuck out, I just cut more levels of it. So there might be 3 layers here that get smaller and smaller, but I just stacked it and I kept gaps between it so I could get that sort of wood look. And then just to smooth out everything being stacked, I used some of that sculpting foam. You can kind of see up here where it smooths the top, or this nose is a little smoother, to get that effect. Then I knew I wanted to light it up, so I started playing with LEDs. I don't like yellow LEDs. They tend to look very orange to me. So I ended up casting these 2 little resin yellow tinted eyes. I intentionally left a bunch of bubbles in there because I liked the look when the light was on. It kind of modeled it a little bit. But I actually run this with white LEDs. And I forgot to bring batteries, which is why they're not turned on at the moment, or you could see them. But beyond that, for his little antennas, this is a wire, and basically I just sculpted using that foam clay, the little bulbs. So they're very delicate, and I try to be cognizant of that, but so far I haven't destroyed them. This is me doing sort of a test hold up, because obviously I was working on this at the same time as other pieces. But then you can see eventually I painted it. Mostly I just used cheap acrylic craft paint, but I watered it down and I basically just layered it up and then would wipe it off as I go to try and get a little bit of this effect, like where it looks a little bit more like wood or there's some washes. So it was more of a washing technique to it. There's Tom's cute matching mask that I made from him, but this is at the con and kind of what it looks like in different lighting scenarios. Okay, the wig. This guy's a beast. I haven't done big wigs until this one. Not really. So I used 2 wigs from Arda. Trish and Le Tigre Classic, which I think is discontinued. I got pure white. Why did I use 2 wigs and not a wig with a bunch of wefts? Because Arda usually doesn't have white in stock in what I need, ever when I need it. So I couldn't get a bunch of wefts. I just had to get 2 long wigs. And it was a little more expensive, but that's where I was. I couldn't wait. I've got a crimping iron to get the poofiness. Basically, you take sections, you crimp it to kind of tease it and poof it and get it bigger and bigger because I wanted this to be as big as possible, but also still as light as possible. And I was trying not to do too much. I didn't want it to be really rigid, and I didn't want to stuff too much of it with like polyfill or anything like that. So basically, I was just crimping the heck out of it, and then got to be glued. You can spray in as you're crimping to keep it thick, and then to shape the points to it. And the felt. You will see what that does in a minute. But this wig is actually a wig and then a weird hat. So you'll see how it kind of works in this video. It's a totally separate thing. So underneath this, I sort of felted a shape. So anyone who hasn't done felting, it's the same thing as like felting a hat. You can use Elmer's glue and water and basically put felt over top of a shape like you'd want it. You don't want to glue it to it permanently, so usually like I use a foam mannequin head, put down some plastic wrap, and then put my foam down that's wet with this glue water and pin it down so it is pinned tightly to the top of my mannequin head and let it dry. And when the glue dries, it keeps that form. So basically you have a little hat shape. So that's what's under this and is the base of everything. And you can kind of see it here, but there's a snap right here sewn into the wig and then one sort of underneath that hat. It's the same kind of, it's a purse snap that has a little bit of magnet and snaps in place. And believe it or not, that is literally the only thing holding this entire top piece to my head. The weight of it beyond that and just how it sits, it holds itself. So that it's strong enough. And I literally was like rolling around on the ground at Dragon Con and it held up. So here you can see how amazing this was and how trust the process I had to be while I was working on this. So this is when I first had crimped and sort of started poofing up the underlayer. The only place I use polyfill is for these front guys to make sure I had this big poof because I was running low on hair and I wanted to make sure the front kept that size. And then some of the stuff that was just getting cut off, I sort of just folded in on itself and made the poofs at the bottom. So these are actually sewn to the polyfill. So it's like a polyfill piece, hair sewn at the bottom, and then hair loosely covering it. I made out of the same fabric, just sort of this little 2 tubes that I turned inside out and twisted to get the little headband. And then I started going in, again, I won't go deep into the details, but anyone who's done spiking on wigs, it's a lot of got to be glued, and then you're just using a blow dryer to heat it and set it, and you're dragging your hand along to sort of get a nice pointy spike, and you're maybe trimming it up at the end. I was really trying to hit, I didn't want super rigid strike. I wanted to be able to move around and still feel like hair and not just stiff spikes. So I have more glue kind of at the points, but then up here I kept it a little looser so it wouldn't look quite as perfect. I still wanted it to look a little rugged. To me, this looks a little like hair and a little like animal fur sometimes, so I was going for that look. I attached this cool hoop to the coolest hat in the most flattering picture I've ever taken of myself. But that's kind of how that came in. And then the other wig, I actually started cutting apart in parts. And to just give it more height, this was the front of the other wig, so it had the skin cap. And I basically just sewed it so that the skin cap wanted to sit out. And so it's helping give height on its own without me having to stuff behind it. So this is literally like a plastic skin cap just folded kind of weirdly, and it's helping just beef everything up. And you'll see here I braided it temporarily to try and keep it out. But like truly, I just added the front and then sort of the middle and the back. It's like I put the other wig back on backwards on top of this to sort of put it together. And then that wig had a bang to it, so I ended up sewing that back on the front top. So you'll kind of see it gets reattached here. I started out trying ribbon on this, and I hated how that looked. So you will see in a minute where I switch that. But again, this is the process before these were spiked, and then just going through each spike, getting them to stand up and, go for the look that I liked. This is still before I've changed these, another flattering 3 a.m. picture of myself, but just testing it out to make sure it still looks good on me and not just on a mannequin head, because you should definitely do that. It can change on you. This is where I started doing this armor, exact same process for every other place, where I just had to spray the fabric on both sides and then add this trim to the edge. But here's where you'll see I switched for Ava foam and then trim around that. And I thought that gave a much cleaner look than this like blobby thing. So that's what's going on with it now. Zombie arm. Sorry, I should whiz through this. I used Ava floor mats, so same foam. There's seamless gloves you can get on Amazon. They're basically like stocking material. So they're a little see-through, but there's no seam on it. So I wanted that to feel the most thin, a low profile as possible. This leather cutting tool is actually what I use to burn some of the pattern in and get those perfect circles. And then again, this is a lot of the same spray paint versus fancy paint. So first up, I tasked my friend, Thomas Weiser, my partner, to help draw out on my arm size where everything would sit. So this was literally us sitting in front of like the switch and rotating link around and like looking and drawing it out and mapping it out. And this was done on masking tape with saran wrap between that and the hairs on my arm that we cut off. And then I was able to lay it flat to make a pattern out of it. So this is what that looks like, cut off and flat. And then I took it and started cutting it out of those floor mats, or I had some 3 millimeter if I needed to really raise areas. But to get these perfect little circles like that, this is a leather tool that's used for cutting like circles in leather, but because it's metal, you can take your heat tool and basically like, I just found the size I wanted and I would use it as a stencil and just take my heat tool around the edge of that perfect circles every time. For the ones that didn't have a center, I would outline the circle and then just sort of burn out the center, and it got a really crisp look. Everything else for the lines, I used like a straight edge, and again, just drew with a metal straight edge to make sure that it stayed nice and straight. Any place where there's a curve, I basically like bent the Ava foam to straighten it, to still use my straight edge, and then just let it curve afterwards. You can see here I started doing weathering. So here's where I did like dots, and then I actually went and weathered. Same thing, I used a heat tool to just sort of burn in some of the like stone weathering or where things have broken apart to get that texture. You can see some places, there is obviously 3D parts to this, where I just added the same foam, but I just turned it sideways and built it up to connect some of the parts. So everything was flat, but I had to mark and remember what part sort of stuck up and connected to each other. So a little bit of mapping out. This was the first trial. Nothing's glued on here, but I was just making sure it fit. And then this is it on my arm. What did I glue this down with? It's either E6000 or... I don't think it was Barge. I think it's E6000 that I made sure to wear a glove under it to not glue it to my hand, but basically I put glue on the back of this, wore the glove, and sort of placed and held things in place. Maybe it wasn't E6000. That dries really slow. It was a fast curing glue. I'll leave it at that, like an E6000. Within this, because Ava foam doesn't have much give, at my wrist and sort of halfway up my arm, there's 2 spots where it's supposed to connect that have little Velcro pieces that are how I attach it. I recommend if you do this, use snaps, because Velcro likes to adhere to the glove and try and rip it. So it's fine. We're just having to be really delicate when we get into it. Nails. There's nails on this. There was I did tests for what nail polish color. I basically bought a set, actually used these to teach a class last year here, so I had some left over. And I cut and shaped them to the size I wanted. The rings, I actually wanted to just get them 3D printed because there were great ones that would be done. I ordered some, and the seller just ghosted me. And so luckily, like I said, So Angry was working on a version of this for Vulpin Props. Vulpin Props very kindly printed me an extra set of his scaled to me, so that's what these are. But they were clear like that, and then I just had to paint them, same paint as the as we were using on everything else. Okay, accessories. Just some other like random things. These earrings, the blue ones, are exactly what Link wears. Got them on Amazon. This tattoo. Oh no. Well, if you want to know where I got it, it's an Etsy seller. I thought I put it in, but I didn't. Someone on Etsy already had them. It's a temporary tattoo. They're huge, they're perfect, and they're fast to put on, and they last like 2 or 3 days. So for Dragon Con, I put it on once, and I was able to wear the costume a couple times. Please hit me up if you're interested. I want to give their name out. And then for the Sheikah slate, which is this, I actually ordered one that my phone fits in so that I could put my phone in it and take like pictures through it, or just have my phone on me in character. It has a little light in the eyeball. This was again another kit by Castro, what is that, Yves? YVES. They're actually really cool. This kit was great. It came with the magnets. It came with the lights for it. It wasn't painted. Thomas actually painted it for me very kindly. It was my birthday present. They also actually make a Zonite kit, and the only reason I didn't get both from them was just because of how they're printed, but they were great. And they found me at Dragon Con, and they recognized their Sheikah slate. Anyway, here's the earrings up close, if you can't see them very well. That's me at Dragon Con putting these tattoos on, but I think they look really great on camera. And the Sheikah slate, just so you can see what a great job Tom did painting it. It looks perfect. And phone fits inside, although in these pictures it's not in there because we're taking pictures with my phone. But yeah, the little eyeball lights up and looks really cool. All right, so that takes you through the costume. Sorry, I'm sort of blasting through it. I want to get to the shield, make sure we have time. This is kind of the full turnaround. I'll be around, though, so if you want to see anything closer, you feel welcome. But all of that went into making this. But let's get to the real reason that I was trying to make this costume. It was this shield. So this is everything you need for it. But I'm going to hold this up and let Tom turn it on for you. Second. So it kind of animates on, it'll animate off. We've also got some bonus, I can't tell what you'll have to say what you're setting it to. Shield? Oh, fairy. We saw the fairy already. There's a fairy, there's a shield. We had a joke one in there. The blood moon rises. It's very exciting from the front, but from my view, it's nothing. So I just have to judge by people's reactions. I also have to be very careful to not clip myself in the face. Do you want to power it down? I'll go back on light. But functionally how these work, and you'll see it as it slows down, it is essentially a fan. So there's 4 blades that come off of it, and each of those blades has an LED array along it, so a bunch of lights. I first realized these things exist in the Atlanta airport. If you ever go through TSA security, there's like a big, it looks like a holograph that says, "No guns!" And Tom and I would always be like, what a waste of money to tell us not to bring guns. And then I was like, what an awesome costume prop. And I was like, I wonder if you could take it off the wall and power it and carry it around. And so that's literally why I made this costume. Let me take this off my arm. Okay, so the nice thing to know about this, those blades actually pop out very easily. So when we're at cons, a lot of times we just pop them out, carry them so I could walk if it was really crowded, and then get wherever I'm going. If you're going to bring this to a convention, be responsible, because I will tell you, the people around you are not like, from the behind you can't see it's there, so you have to be watching out for other people. So I at all times would have it on one arm, and then Tom would be, or I'd have a friend who would be aware on the other side so no one could come up behind me and walk into it. But I'll tell you, even from the front, like there's a lot of like, it's shiny, people trying to touch. So you really have to be cognizant. I do not think it would truly hurt anyone. I think if it hits something, it might feel like someone like whacking you a little hard. I don't think it's gonna like murder anybody, but you could break this. And as you can see from the price tag on it, it's $250 for the unit. So you kind of got to watch out for it. But you can literally get it underneath. I kind of put, it's from Amazon. We got that. The tricky part to run this is that it needs continuous electricity. So most power sources like battery banks, it's AC, it doesn't continue, and it wouldn't run it. So we did a lot of trial and error and searching around for a battery bank that would be continuous and also be small enough to fit inside the shield, but hold up for a long amount of time. So we found this one. There's actually one that's slightly bigger. So this is a 3,000. There's a 6,000 that will run twice as long. But I think this one's graded to run, it's supposed to run 2 hours. After 1 hour, this won't display anymore, because at 1 hour, even though it's like trying to run continuously, it gets tired, it can't do it anymore, it's not continuous. So we found that out by testing and just literally running this for like as long as they could at home. The one that's bigger will run twice as long, but it was heavy and I'm a little noodle arm, so I went with the smaller profile one. But we set up the back of this, and afterwards, if you guys are interested, I can bust open the back and show you how it's all mounted together. But functionally, we didn't have to take anything apart and truly rewire it. We just got this, found the battery, and we needed one adapter to make sure we went male to male, and we were in business. Now, the complicated parts beyond that, we're building it and making the animation. So use the same process where I traced and printed this out, cut it out a bunch of Ava foam. 5 minutes? All right, going fast. Cut out a bunch of pieces, labeled them. It was the weirdest puzzle I've ever done. But you can see there's a wooden piece behind it. That's sort of the base of the shield that everything's mounted to. So the foam is set on top of that. You can see same techniques of it coming together. And then the fan nests inside it. I could have set it even further back inside it so it wouldn't stick out as far as it does here, but I intentionally wanted it to be sticking out this far to give a little bit more depth when it was animating in front of it. But I did debate for a while sinking it even further in. This is kind of how the back looks. So this handle and this strap both attached to the wood itself, so it's a nice secure thing to hold on to. The animation's the tricky part. So I traced out what I thought this was, again, in vector, and I handed it over to my partner Tom, actually, since he is an animator. He pulled it into After Effects, and you can kind of see from this the different steps. So I did the base art, and then he did a little bit of this intro, like having it draw in and draw out animation, and then added this glow and displacement and roughen edges. All of this is stuff that's in the actual program. You don't have to get anything extra to make it happen. If you have questions, you can ask Thomas about that later. He loves answering questions. But yeah, you can see, I've already turned it on for you, so we won't stay here. But then I went into painting it, again, just taped off parts that I didn't want to get paint on it, and went nuts with the spray cans. And this was it traveling. This is what it looks like without those little pegs in it. And here's some pictures of how it shoots at a convention. So low light, it looks pretty dang convincing, like it looks photoshopped. I will say though, depending on what shutter speed you're shooting at, it's like the same problem when you like videotape a helicopter and it just looks like this creepy thing floating through the air. Same problem. So if you're trying to shoot this, you want someone who can like either do a lower shutter speed and you're holding really still, or you got to kind of not match exactly how it's running, or you'll get things like this. But that's it. We've run through it. It's very quick. If you've got questions, I know we're right at time. I don't want to hold it up, but I am happy to chat with any of you out there and answer any questions or let you see anything up close. Thank you.